Hello and welcome to our first monthly Cybersecurity Meetup, where we will try to provide you with the latest information you need to know about current cybersecurity threat landscape and talk about what's in the news. I'm Luis Alvarez, President and CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, and with me today I have our Chief Security Officer, Jeff Dix, who's on the screen remotely, and in here in the conference room with me is Elliott Frutkin, our Chief Technology Advisor. Feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions. We've scheduled this for about 30 minutes. Got a lot of content that we hope to cover, but we'll answer questions as we go along, or we'll stick around after the content is done and answer any questions we can as long as possible. But if we don't get to them, rest assured we will answer your questions via email, if no other way. So let's get started. Elliott, I had a completely different agenda when we put this thing together. We scheduled this thing a few weeks ago, but a lot of different things have happened in the last couple of days.
It's been an eventful weekend.
An eventful weekend. So today we're going to talk about two things that are very topical, probably top of mind for most of you out there. One is the Kasaya ransomware attack that happened starting last Friday. There's no reason why we'll talk more about it, but there's a reason it started on Friday. And then we'll also deal with the Microsoft emergency vulnerability patch that was released yesterday to address something called the Windows print spooler. It affects millions of PCs around the world, and it's, they call it the print nightmare because it's such a big problem. So we'll tackle both of those as well as any questions you might ask. So let's get started.
Sure. Louis, why don't you just start by giving us an overview of the Kasaya attack? What is it all about? What do we know? What happened? What are the effects?
Sure, great question. So Kasaya is a software company that provides software called remote management and monitoring tools for IT service providers like us, as well as a lot of companies that use their software in their IT shops. We don't use Kasaya. Let me make that clear. We use a completely different product, but very similar functionality. There's a number of these companies out there. And in a way, Kasaya is similar to SolarWinds, and in that SolarWinds provides the same kind of software services to large enterprises, large companies. And Kasaya is mostly focused on the small to mid-sized market. What happened was that at some point prior to last Friday, a cybercriminal gang called Revil, R with evil behind it, managed to somehow infiltrate their software stack and change the agent that's deployed to the desktops, which is part of how Kasaya works. It deploys agents to all these PCs and laptops and systems out there. And they were able to load a ransomware payload into one of the agents. And on Friday, when Kasaya did what Kasaya usually does and pushes out updates, those updates spread throughout not just their resellers, people like us, but also their customers of those resellers. So the impact was pretty brutal, and it's still ongoing as of today. Immediately on Friday, Kasaya asked all of their providers to turn off their servers. They turned off their servers because they also have a service that is directly cloud-based. And by the time they did that, it still had impacted tens of thousands of systems that are down right now. The criminal gang, Revil, claims that over 1 million systems are down. Kasaya themselves have said that it's just several thousand, but they're not very specific. But we do know that at least 1,500 of their resellers got hit, and consequently, those customers of those resellers also got impacted.
You mentioned that there was a reason it happened when it happened.
Yeah. So the idea that these guys, the cybercriminal gang Revil, which is based in Russia or Eastern Europe, someplace. They did it on Friday because they knew that it was going to be a long weekend and they could do the most damage before being detected on Monday or on Tuesday when people came back to the office. Fortunately, the infection was caught by not Kasaya directly, but by other people that started to see things go awry. And so Kasaya, not really knowing what was going on, knew that it was being caused by these agents that were being spread, being updated with malware. So they issued the call for everybody to shut down those servers so that the agents themselves that hadn't been updated wouldn't get updated, just to spread the infection even further.
One of the things that I've been reading in the news a lot is that they're calling this a supply chain attack. What can you explain what's a supply chain attack? What does that mean?
Great question. Supply chain attack is an attack that starts in one area, but doesn't just impact that particular business. It actually is designed to spread throughout a number of businesses that are all connected. Very similar to SolarWinds, which was also a supply chain attack. It was intended to spread throughout all the companies that were interrelated and interlocked. So in this case, Kasaya, it would have been spread to the resellers. The resellers would spread it to their clients and potentially even other clients if there was, additional Kasaya agents being deployed. It's a very effective tool. And you can contrast that with what happened with JBS Meat Processing Company, because that wasn't a supply chain attack. That was just an attack on a specific target by Regal, by the way, the same folks that did Kasaya. The idea is to try to impact as many people as possible and cause as much damage as possible.
I probably should have started with this question, but maybe Jeff, you can tell us why listen to what we're saying and why trust ATG and what we say. What qualifies us?
Well, I would say that we have a lot of experience in this space. I spent 8 years working with the DoD on a DoD contract, doing nothing but handling their endpoint and server security. So I'm very familiar with the process of how to go about securing and reducing the risks of a cyber attack or a malware event. We also follow the standards that the DoD has adopted, those being Nist, which is a cybersecurity standard that's used widely in the Department of Defense and in the federal government. We also align our approach to the Center for Internet Security's 18 security controls. That's a very well-known and always changing and adapting set of standards. We're also looking at aligning some of our practices with what's called the CMMC protocol, and that stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which is a certification that all DoD subcontractors by the year 2025 will have to attain that certification. So we're very versed in the standards and the approaches of cybersecurity and cybersecurity defense. And we've brought that experience in from the DoD with the contracts that we serviced in the past, and are now using that for our current clients that are under our managed security services program.
I know one of the things that you've been working on, Jeff, is our annual certification in audit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
Why it's important to ask
Yes.
somebody that's providing cybersecurity advice what qualifies them to give that advice?
Absolutely. In addition to this experience, which I just commented about, we go through an annual audit from an organization called the MSP Alliance. MSP obviously is a managed services provider, and we're a member of that group. And as a member, we undergo a thorough audit every year. It's usually about a 3-month process where we have to provide documentation on all our policies and procedures, and every aspect of our MSP business is looked at, and we attain that and have to renew that on an annual basis. So when you see that MSP Verify logo on our websites or on our business collateral, that you can rest assured that there's some meaning behind that. There's an annual audit that we go through every year to attain that certification.
So one of the things, because this was a supply chain attack, I think it's important to know not only what you're doing internally for cybersecurity at your organization, but how secure are your vendors and partners and providers and people that you work with? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more, especially around here, because there's so many ag companies that work with large customers like Costco or Walmart, Sam's Club, and so on. And those organizations want to ensure that their supply chain is secure, and they want to make sure that when they order product, that product is going to show up. So if Costco, which is driven by very small margins, as most ag people will tell you, it says, hey, we need to have a pallet of bagged salads show up in Phoenix, Arizona at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, so we can stock the shelves in time to have customers buy it. And their supplier gets hit by a cyber attack, a ransomware attack, or some other hack that keeps them from being able to provide that product to them. They're going to find another supplier. So they're starting to ask hard questions of their suppliers, saying, what are you doing to protect yourself? And also, who has access to your systems, and what are they doing to protect themselves? So you're seeing this cascading effect where everybody in the supply chain is going to have to start being better about what we call cyber hygiene, that is protecting themselves and doing more to ensure that they're not the weak link, that they're not the ones that are going to cause a problem. And that's one of the things that we work with our clients with, is trying to make sure that they understand that they're part of a whole ecosystem, that they're not just a standalone organization. We get that question a lot when we talk about cybersecurity to folks. Well, I'm just a small fill in the blank number of person company here in Salinas or in King City or in Pacific Grove. Why would anybody come after me? And the reality is, just like the Kasaya attack, we're all targets of opportunity. They're just trying to make money. This is a big business. Last year, reportedly, and of course there's a lot of attacks that never get reported, so we don't know if this number is true, but we do know that it's at the bottom end of the scale. But supposedly there was a $250 billion worth of ransom paid last year worldwide, and that money is used not just to serve the cyber criminals' lifestyle, but it's also in many cases used for nefarious purposes, to fund terrorists, to fund the Taliban and places like that. And that's one of the reasons that the US government is starting to crack down on ransomware payments. In fact, right now, if you get hit by ransomware, before you can even contemplate paying the ransom, you're supposed to contact the Department of Justice and get permission, because they want to check to make sure that the folks that are asking for the ransom are not the terrorists. If it's just a regular criminal gang, they might let you pay that. But if it's a terrorist organization, they're not going to allow you to pay that ransom. So this is becoming a real serious issue, because it has a lot of ramifications outside of just, a cyber attack.
So actually that leads into my next question, and that is, what is the motivation behind these kinds of attacks? Is it, is it to make money? Is it political? Is it to, harm the United States? What's going on here?
All of the above. There are cyber crime gangs like Regal, for example, that are known to be supported by the Russian government to the extent that they are allowed to openly function in Eastern Europe and in Russia without any sort of interference. Whereas you would think, if the United States reported, hey, you got a cyber criminal gang in your country, get rid of them, that country would do that for us. But it's in Russia's best interest to let the United States suffer a little bit, economically, politically, in any way. Anything bad that happens to us is good for that. And Russia's not alone. You have North Korea, China, a number of countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are involved in some of these things and supporting gangs because they make money, and they bring money to their economy, especially if you're somebody like a North Korea that doesn't have any other real way to make money outside of doing criminal activities. And because there's so much money in this, it's a growing industry. It's not shrinking. And part of that growth, by the way, part of the growth of I think a big part of the growth of ransomware is the existence of cryptocurrencies. If we did not have Bitcoin, I don't think you'd have the level of crime that you do, because the money could be traced, right? So if a cyber criminal asks you to send them, $1 million via Visa, which is really easy for Visa to figure out where that money's going and take it back when you've gotten your decryptor key. But Bitcoin hides all that. Bitcoin became the biggest disruptor and the biggest reason why we're seeing ransomware growing so fast and so furiously.
So is it fair to say that this kind of thing is going to continue?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going anywhere, especially until we can somehow figure out how to get certain countries to participate in eliminating the problem. But even then, there are, yes, there are these large gangs like Revil, but there are a bunch of independents out there that function under the radar. Nobody knows where they're at. Nobody knows, who's supporting them, and they won't go away, even if you crack down on the big gangs. And then, like I said, it's a money-making thing. So you get rid of Revil, there's another gang that's going to pop up. A couple days later, maybe some of the ex-employees of Revil start another organization.
We'll even create their own startup.
Exactly.
I know here at ATG, one of our big moves for our managed security services clients is zero trust networks. And I know we have some tools around that. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about ThreatLocker and what it does and why it is so important in our toolkit?
Yeah, absolutely. In most networks out there, there is a lot of trust for applications that run, which means basically that if somebody needs to run an application or download an update, they're able to do that, run an executable, update their software or install the software without pretty much interference from the network. And that's called, that's full trust. You're trusting all these applications. The problem with that approach is, however, what if somebody's clicking on or downloading a executable that has ransomware and has an encryptor in it that's going to go out and encrypt all your data, or any other malware, nefarious malware software that might try to run on your system. So we just recently added to our managed security services stack a product called ThreatLocker, which is an application control product. And that is the exact opposite of full trust. It's zero trust. And how it works is that nothing that in your computing environment, whether it be on your workstations or your servers, can actually run unless it's been allowed to run through what's called a whitelist. So only approved executables can now run on clients' networks that has this technology deployed into. So what that gives us the ability to do is, if somebody downloads ransomware and clicks on the executable, the executable will be shut down and will not be allowed to run. So it's a very effective way to mitigate ransomware and other malicious software that's trying to run on your environment. This type of technology has been around for quite some time. However, it was very difficult to implement because usually you'd have to have dedicated resources just to manage the whitelists in an environment. But with cloud-based computing and ThreatLocker in the cloud, we start with a list of approved applications, the common applications such as Word and Excel and PowerPoint, the things that the applications that people typically run every day. And then we go through a period of learning. We put these software on your systems and we learn all the programs that are running in your environment, and we add those to the whitelist. And then the last step is to enable the whitelist and not allow anything to run that's not been previously approved. So it's a very effective tool to mitigate against ransomware in particular, but pretty much any malicious software that tries to run on your environments.
Let me add something to that, because I don't want people to get the mistaken impression that cybersecurity is all about finding the right, mix of tools. That's important. I mean, you need to have endpoint protection, you need to have firewalls, you need to have tools like detection and response tools that we use, as well as something like ThreatLocker for zero trust networking. But those are all pieces of the puzzle. We can't build walls high enough or moats wide enough to keep the barbarians from storming the castle. They're going to get through. So that's one of the reasons that we do use the Nist cybersecurity framework, because it addresses not just the things that you need to protect, but it also talks about how to set up a system to detect that something's gone sideways, because that something might get through. So at least if you can detect it, you can respond to it. And you need to have a way to respond correctly. So it's a whole holistic system of managing cybersecurity, and it starts with education. That's one of the reasons that part of our efforts with our clients is to provide as much education and educational opportunities as possible. Because, to me, cybersecurity is kind of like having a workplace safety program. A workplace safety program is not just about putting a binder together with rules and policies and procedures. It's about, practicing those things. It's about educating your employees on safe practices and doing the right things, because the end result is you're going to have fewer accidents. You're going to have less cost overall because you're doing the right things up front. And cybersecurity is the same way. You need to do the right things up front so that you don't suffer from a ransomware attack. Or if you do, you can recover from it, because we've taken precautions to ensure that the backups, for example, can't get infected by ransomware. We use a technology in our backup systems called air gapping, which means that the backup files are protected from the ransomware attack because they can't get to it. In the case of many ransomware attacks, what you find is that the backups are directly connected to the network. And so that's the first thing that are sought out by the bad guys. Jeff will tell you, these guys write their code to say, where's the backup? Let's go corrupt that backup so that you have no choice but to pay the ransom because your backups are corrupted. So when you look at somebody like a JBS, for example, multi-billion-dollar meat processor, they had to pay the ransom because their backups weren't good and they needed to get their systems unencrypted so they can get back to work. And, it has to be a completely holistic process. And that includes patching, which brings us to this, the Principler patch that just got released. Microsoft learned about a vulnerability in their Principler. The Principler is the thing that when you say, I want to print something, it queues up the print job and then sends the print job to the printer. Real simple functionality, but it had a vulnerability that allowed bad guys to take control of that Principler and then issue commands, system level commands. And when you have system level access, it's like having godlike access to a system. And make that PC do things that the Principler was never intended to allow. So Microsoft patched it. That patch was released yesterday. Our clients will start getting it today over the normal patching cycle. But patching is part of the process. Patching is part of cybersecurity, because you have to know, what vulnerabilities you have on your networks and then address those vulnerabilities, because if not, those are places that can be exploited by the bad guys to gain access to your system, to do things to your system, and steal money, create ransomware, all sorts of stuff.
One thing that I want to cover before our half hour is up, and we'll stick around and keep talking for anybody that's interested. But last week, I was actually very interested to find that I was able to buy personal cybersecurity insurance, which I did. But that, reminded me about the discussions that we have with our clients and anybody that asks about the importance of having cyber insurance. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why is it important, more critical now than ever?
Yeah, well, cyber insurance is something that every business should have just in case. Because when you have an incident like a ransomware attack, it's going to cost you, it can conceivably cost you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to recover from it. So in a way, I always, whenever I talk about cyber insurance, people will say, oh, so it's like car insurance. And I say, no, it's like life insurance. You don't ever want to use it. It's more about, having that protection just in case, but doing everything you can to not ever have to tap into that. And one of the interesting things about cyber insurance is that right now it's still relatively inexpensive, but according to the statistics that I read just last week, the insurance companies are paying out 170% of the premiums they're collecting. So they're losing vast amounts of money on cyber insurance. And so one of the things that they're doing is they're carving out, they already did this in Europe, but you're going to see this here in the United States, I think, in the not too distant future, where they're carving out the exception saying, we won't pay for ransomware. Right now, you have a cap, a maximum that they'll pay. And by the way, the cyber criminals know that. One of the first things they do is ask you, do you have insurance, and what's your maximum for ransomware payout? That's what we want. And so they're very sophisticated, and they know how to tap into that sort of thing. But eventually that will be, excluded from the policy, which means that if there's any ransomware to be paid, it's going to be paid out of pocket. So cyber insurance is really important to have. If you talk to your insurance broker, if you don't have one, or your insurance broker doesn't know what we're talking about, give us a call, and we'll be happy to direct you to folks that we know that locally that can get you that policy.
One thing I want to squeeze in our last 2 official minutes is we talk about JBS and we talk about Kasaya and all the organizations that's hit. But I always try and make sure that people understand that all of this is also happening locally, here in Monterey County and Santa Cruz County, all over the country. But, what's going on here? Who's getting hit? What are the effects?
Well, I to steal from Kevin Bacon a little bit, I think everybody is at best 2 degrees of separation from somebody that has gotten hit by a ransomware attack or some other hack. It's so prevalent. I know of at least 3 ad companies, large ad companies, that were hit locally. I won't say their names because it wasn't public knowledge, but 2 of them were down for over 10 days where they couldn't process anything. And they had to basically beg their competitors to fulfill their orders because they couldn't do it. And we've heard of law firms that have gotten hit, doctors' offices. It's across the board. And those of you that are watching today, I bet you, if you don't know anybody, I'd be surprised, but chances are somebody in your inner circle knows somebody who got hit. So you can just ask them.
Well, we're about to hit 11:30 here.
Yeah, we have a couple questions, so let's tackle those. And from Jim Warner, I've heard about Wi-Fi frag attack. What is this? Do I need to do anything? Jeff, I'm not familiar with a frag attack. I know, I would say if you are using Wi-Fi, please follow the rules. Only use Wi-Fi that has a passcode. Do not use open Wi-Fi. Please don't go to Starbucks and use their Wi-Fi. Don't use the Wi-Fi at Safeway. I know every time I go to Safeway, it wants me to connect up, and I'm like, nope, don't connect. Those are.
In addition, I would say you also want to make sure that you're using the most latest security protocol for Wi-Fi, which is WPA2.
Yeah, WPA2. There's a lot of older Wi-Fi access points out there that are very vulnerable to being exploited. And We used to talk a lot about the drive-by Wi-Fi exploits where people would park outside a building and try to hack into Wi-Fi. That's still going on. It's not, it hasn't gone away. But just follow good cyber hygiene when it comes to Wi-Fi networks. Enrico wants to know, what's the best way for us as clients of ATG to protect ourselves from a cyber attack? What are the signs we need to be looking for? Well, I would say if you are taking the training that we provide, make available to you, make sure that your employees are doing that training and understand the importance of cybersecurity. Awareness is the number one thing you can do for your team. We can take care of all the back end stuff, making sure you have the right tools deployed as best as possible. Make sure that we can respond and recover if an incident happens and the damage is minimized. But awareness is something we can't control. That's something that we need. When we talk about cyber security awareness training, we want the management team, the leadership team of that business, of business leaders, whether they're the owners or the senior executives, to lead by example and do the training, because I think that sends a message that it's important. I remember doing some training with the Cannery Road Company, and Ted Balistreri was in there, leading the charge, saying, "Hey, no, this is important. Everybody pay attention." And that sends a signal. So if you're in a leadership position, demonstrate that you are serious about cybersecurity and that it's an important thing for you. Take the training, get your people to take that training.
Yes, I would just add, if I could, just one last thought on that is that the threat actors or hackers know that the folks that you employ in your organizations are the weakest link, and they go directly to them for their phishing emails to get them to download or run executables that are malicious. So one of the number one things is what Lewis had just described, is that everybody in your organization take cyber awareness training so that we can mitigate, or you can mitigate some of that focus on your end users.
Right.
What else do we have to talk about? I guess anybody who needs to go can certainly hop off. Like to keep a commitment when we schedule something for 30 minutes. So thank you very much for joining us. We have plenty more to talk about for anybody that wants to stay on.
One of the things that I want to point out, Jeff was talking about Threat Locker, and it is one of the most important pieces of our cybersecurity stack. And I attended a webinar after the Kasaya event happened, where on Monday that they did during the holiday, where they talked about how even though it was a very sophisticated attack, within 30 minutes, the team at Threat Locker had figured out there was something that was just not right with the agents that were being updated. And they were able to really fairly quickly, within 30 minutes, write a policy that they globally deployed throughout their network, which kept the agent from spreading further. So, those are the kinds of tools that we partner with. We also have a detection and response tool company we work with, Huntress, that also was very active. You probably, if you read any of the articles about Kasaya, heard Kyle, their CEO, be quoted a number of times. He's a real smart guy. He used to be an NSA'er. Started the company with the idea that he was tired of cyber bad guys winning all the time, and he wanted to fight back. And he couldn't do it in the NSA, so he retired from the military and decided to go into business for himself. But having those companies rise up and help in a situation like this tells you that as a community, the IT community is unified in trying to do everything we possibly can to protect our clients. Sadly, I won't say everybody, because there's a lot of IT providers out there that just don't take it seriously enough, or think that all they need to do is just put endpoint protection like Windows Defender or WebRoot out there and not worry about anything else. But that's just that's table stakes. That's the minimum you can do. You need to do a lot more and create a plan and create, we do cybersecurity assessments, not because we think that it's fun, because Jeff does them and he'll tell you. But we do them because we want our clients to know where they're at. It's like, okay, here's where we're at. Here's where we want to go. How do we get there? And we know we're not going to get there in a day or maybe even a year. It's going to be an evolutionary process as systems age out and we put in better things. But at the end of the day, it's about this, complete holistic approach to protecting yourself and your community. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more regulation coming down from the federal side in particular. President Biden issued an executive order back in May that pretty bluntly laid out that we needed to do a better job of protecting ourselves. And there's certain key milestones that are upcoming, some of them as soon as this month. And it's going to require, ostensibly, people will focus on the government contractor part of this, but really it's going to require anybody that receives federal funding to follow a minimum level of protection. And that means that, if you're out there and you're getting federal funds, be it grants or, you're being compensated for work being done, chances are you're going to have to provide some proof that you're following these procedures by the end, I'd say by the end of 2022 at the rate that we're going, but you're going to start seeing more of that. And California is looking at doing some things as are other states. So regulation of cybersecurity practices is coming. And, that means that we might, our industry as service providers will also be impacted, because I think there's going to be some requirements for those of us who are helping other organizations maintain a good cyber hygiene posture to prove that we know what we're talking about. And just like we go through the MSP verify and cyber verify audit process, we're going to see something like that become more commonplace.
And we fully expect to see some additional guidance coming from the White House and the federal government as the president works with the intelligence and law enforcement community to look into this Kasaya attack.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because, it's our industry. So we know Kasaya and we know ConnectWise, we know Autotask, all these companies that do this sort of stuff. But to listen to a press conference where the president of the United States says Kasaya, you're like, what? Why is he talking about Kasaya? But it is a big deal. In fact, they're having a meeting even as we speak in DC with all those department heads to basically strategize on, what is the impact of this attack? Could it have been prevented? What do they need to do? What does the federal government need to do to get companies like Kasaya to address vulnerabilities faster and implement ways and tools and systems to ensure that this doesn't happen again? Because this is not the first time Kasaya got hit. They got hit back in 2019. Not the same kind of attack, but similar. And they're not alone. We've had other vendors get hit. SolarWinds, obviously, we've talked about them. But there are other companies out there that are less known that have vulnerabilities that have been exploited, including LinkedIn, and AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. So it's not, sometimes it's frustrating because you think if these big companies can't protect themselves, how can we protect ourselves and our clients? Nothing's guaranteed though. That's why we spend so much time talking about it, learning about it, educating ourselves on it as much as possible, because it's an evolving threat and we need to just stay a little bit ahead of it.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. Somebody asked, what are the risks of connecting personal devices to a network at work? And it should be allowed. The answer is no. It should be allowed. If you have visitors, you should always create a guest network, whether that's a guest Wi-Fi network or hardwired network, but that network should never allow anybody to access your office network. Only those systems that are vetted should be on that network. So for example, if we are deploying Threat Locker to every system on a network, but then on that same network, somebody plugs in that doesn't have Threat Locker and gets infected, they might infect other systems. And so we want to make sure that all of the systems that are part of the work network are completely separated from bring your own devices. So if you allow your employees to bring their own devices and plug into the network, please talk to us. We want to create a safe way for them to do that. That won't impact the rest of the work network adversely.
To take that a step further, another practice that I see, which is a very, very bad practice, is basically letting other people use your work computer, especially if you have a laptop and you take it home and the kids want to watch Netflix or YouTube or play a game. That's not the type of thing that should be done on a work laptop. It should be dedicated to work and get a different computer, to explore the internet and, have fun and let your kids play with.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when, we now have a lot of people still working remotely, still working from home, at least part-time, if not all the time. And those systems are hopefully supplied by their companies so that they're working on a system that has all the protections that they would have even if they were in the office. But they're still connected to the same network that all the other devices in the house are connected to, whether that's your Fire Stick or your Peloton or whatever else you got that's now internet aware. If you can separate those at home, I have a home network that's strictly just for all these little devices, and all they can do is just talk to the internet, and that's it. But when I'm working from home, I'm working on a secure network that I can connect to the office, knowing that I'm not going to accidentally infect anybody here with one of my weird little, IoT devices connecting up and doing something strange.
Like your Wi-Fi enabled washer and
Yeah,
dryer
exactly.
or refrigerator.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're seeing so many, so many things that were never designed to be connected to the internet, getting connected to the internet.
Sometimes I ask myself why, but
I ask myself why all the time, and every time I think about buying one, I think if it really needs to be
yeah,
connected to the internet.
I do have to say, I got a Traeger that is Wi-Fi enabled, and I really do like being able to monitor that thing if I'm not in the house, or turn it on before I get home so I can start smoking
until someone ruins your dinner.
until the bad guys hack into my Traeger.
Yep.
Run your tie tip.
Other questions?
I think that's it. Well, thank you all. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate your attention. Feel free to reach out if you have additional questions at any time. And let us know if this was helpful. Pop us an email. You know how to contact us or reach us. We really like to know how we can make these cybersecurity meetups better in the future. Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next month.
Take care.